Good morning, everyone. I hope that was kind of a lengthier scripture reading, but I pray that you pay attention to it. I believe it speaks a lot, especially as we're going to be getting in this theme, starting this week of joy in faith. And I hope that you're excited to be here. This is week number 3 of the semester. Keeping count because we only have 15, so make sure you get your stuff done. But I hope that you are excited to be here. Now, our texts are going to come from Philippians and Colossians. So if you have your Bible with you, let's go ahead and open to Philippians. I'm going to be coming from Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 through 18. Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 through 18. It says, "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you both to will and to work for His good pleasure. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. Even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me." So in this text, we see a lot of ideas and a lot of words being used here. And the two I really want to highlight and focus on today for the time we have is the grumbling, the complaining, versus the gladness and the rejoicing. So how many of you guys like to be around people who do complain? If you do, let's see a hand for it. All right, we got one person. One person does. I figure we wouldn't like that. We don't want to be around people who are complaining. We don't like it. And these people are the ones who every time you go to them, you can assume it's going to be that way. And these can be people you love deeply. You know, a parent, a sibling, a friend. You love them, but you know they still can always be complaining. They find something negative to cling to, and that is what they focus on. Now, flipping this over, how many of you would consider yourself to be that grumbler, that complainer? For real this time, Barron actually says yes. So I assume none of us will say we always are a complainer. Very often in our lives, we do end up being that person. We end up being the one who focuses on the negative things in our life. We want to tell people about it. We want to tell them, this is what's going on for me. It's so hard. I can't believe this is happening. And we grumble, we complain, and doing so we bring other people down. This year, I was fortunate, or I was forced, either way you want to look at it, to drive some of the trip down to Gulf. So that's about 7 hours away in Orange Beach. So I drove maybe 2 hours at a time and maybe 7 in total. Now, during that time, I'd never heard so much complaining from people at the congregation at Center Hill that I was with. I'd never heard complain like this before. So I'm driving, and I hear, "Josh, it's too hot." So I'll turn the temperature down. And then I'll hear it's too cold, so I'll turn it up. And then they both at the same time say it's too cold. Then they say, "No, it's fine." And the other say it's hot. So they're complaining this way. We had a flat tire going down at some point. I don't know when we got it, but the bus started shaking a little bit. And people were complaining about saying, "Josh, you're doing something wrong." I'm thinking, I'm just driving the bus. Everything's fine. But they were complaining. They complained about how it's not comfortable, how we're being here too long. Eventually, I got tired of it, put headphones in, and just drove as best I could. Now, I'm going to get real for a second. This may step on some of your toes, but believe me, it stepped on mine already as I was preparing this. Again, I mentioned we're only in the 3rd week of this semester. But I know I've heard several times people complaining about coursework. People complaining about, I have all this stuff to do. I'm going to get to myself. I see you already, Matt. I know many of you have already heard me complaining about World Literature B. There's a lot of reading in that class, a lot of writing, and I'm not happy that I have to do that. But it's not good that we complain, because by complaining, we always bring others down. So again, the theme of the semester is joy and faith, and I'm here to give you an introduction to this. So these two words, joy and complaining. Do these two things really have any room to be in the same person at the same time? They do not. Now, we can be unhappy and have joy. I'm not very happy doing a lot of things, but I can still be joyful doing it. We can still be happy and have joy sometimes as well. And we'll see that in our time together. But joy and grumbling do not have any room to be together. So now let's look at some biblical texts of grumblings and complainings. And as I always do when this happens, I always want to go to the Old Testament because we see it so often there. And I'm assuming most of you have read the story of Israel. You've read the Old Testament. And we see that Israel complains a lot during this time. Exodus, Numbers especially. If you were to read Psalm 106, you would find a lot of these complaints summed up, a lot of their failures summed up in that chapter. But I want to simply read a few of these complaints to you, and you can try to flip with me, but it's probably easiest to listen to what they say. We're going to look at 4 of them, okay? The first is Exodus 15, verses 22 through 24, and this is very soon after they escaped Egypt. It says, "Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah, because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, 'What shall we drink?'" So the first complaint we see here is, where's the water at? You've saved us, you've had us walking for 3 days, there's no water. We get to a place where there is water, we can't drink it, it's bitter. We are thirsty. Next we have Exodus 16, 2 through 3. "And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, 'Would that we have died in the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out in this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger.'" So first we had them wanting water. They were thirsty. Now they've been led, they've had water, and they're saying, "We're hungry. There's nothing here to eat. Did you bring us out here to die? We are hungry. We want food." Numbers 11, 4 through 6. "Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. And the people of Israel also wept again and said, 'Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt, and it cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at.'" So now they're saying, we want different food. We're sick and tired of manna, which is ridiculous to say. Manna comes from heaven. God gave it to them and say, "I'm sick and tired of going collecting manna, having manna all day long. I want fish. I want meat. I want what we had back in Egypt." And then lastly, Numbers 14, verses 2 through 4. It says, "And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, 'Would that we have died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into a land to be felled by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?' And they said to one another, 'Let us choose a leader and go back.'" So here the last complaint is new leadership. We don't want to do this anymore. We're tired of following, going to this place because nothing's happening. We're going to end up being killed. Let's go back to Egypt. So again, they very soon, very early before they started complaining, they were rescued by God powerfully through the Red Sea. And then immediately we see them begin to complain, saying, "God, we need more. We need this. We need that." About food, water, food again, leadership. It's pathetic, and it pushes God and Moses to the breaking point. At some point, God's wrath is outspilled because his patience runs up. And it is due to this complaining that they ultimately are forbidden from entering the Promised Land. Eventually, they send spies in, 10 come back, and they complain, "It is too hard. They have too big of walls. There are giant people there. We can't do it." Again, getting real today, we still find complaining. Oftentimes, we'll look at Israel and we'll say, "How could you have complained? How could you sit here and complain when you knew God was with you, when you saw him part the waters?" And we kind of give ourselves a free pass. We look at them and say, "How dare you?" But then we go about and we will complain very often. Sure, we don't really complain about food or water, but we still complain about many things. Complain about our service times. Complain about our preacher and the time he does his lessons and what he preaches on, our elders, their decisions, the members themselves, and this goes on. And this is only dealing with complaints in the religious sphere. We go on to our living situations. We're not pleased with where we live. We're not pleased with the car we have. We're not pleased with our relationships, the lack thereof relationships, our community, our nation, our president. And this is with believers, not talking about those who are outside. If we look at Israel and how God dealt with them and the shame we have upon them, we think for some reason we have a free pass. But it's obvious that complaining against God, he is against it. And even though I find myself doing it, I'm also against it. So what's the solution then, okay? So we have complaining. We know it's bad. We know it gets on God's nerves. What is the solution? The answer to this is also found in what we read in Philippians chapter 2. Let's read again, starting verse 14 this time. "Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. Even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me. So the answer that Paul gives about not complaining, he simply says, don't do it. He says, stop. If you guys have watched, there's a YouTube video about counseling where people come with their problems, like I have a problem with, I'm addicted to this, I'm fighting with my family. The guy says, stop. Just don't do it. So Paul gives us that at the beginning. And, we think, how can you say this, Paul? How can you say just stop? Who are you to tell us not to complain? Who are you to have this bold idea to be able to have this statement? And it's nice he can say, even if I'm poured out as a drink offering, I will be glad and rejoice. Sure, Paul, you could say that it might look nice. But Paul didn't just write it. Paul didn't just say it. Paul didn't put it there to look pretty. Paul lived that. And praise be to God that he did. And praise be to God that we have him as an example to look to. For the rest of our time, I want to look at Paul's life and the idea of him being poured out as a drink offering, but still being able to rejoice. Still being able to tell others, rejoice and be glad with me. We have several letters of the New Testament written by Paul, and some of these were written from prison. We call these the prison epistles. We have classes on those. And Philippians and Colossians we're going to be in this semester were written from prison. Okay? And now, prison, what we think today with a jail cell, we have a mattress in there. We have a place to use the bathroom. It's, pretty okay if you think about it. For Paul, it wasn't like this. Circumstances were the same. He didn't have a bed to lay on. He was chained up to something. And while he's there, he's able to say, rejoice with me. Be glad and rejoice, as he does so often in Philippians. He can be the most encouraging even in these letters. Turn with me now to 2 Corinthians chapter 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. We'll look at verses 22 through 29. Here, Paul's going to list a lot of sorrows he went through, a lot of events he went through by being a minister of the gospel. So 2 Corinthians 11, starting in 22. It says, are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the offspring of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am a better one. I'm talking like a madman with far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings and often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea. On frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, and dangers from false brothers. In toil and in hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, and cold and exposure. And apart from other things, there is the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Who is weak and I am not weak? Who is made to fall and I am not indignant? So Paul here lists a lot of things he went through, some terrible things. First, he starts really off by talking about how he has went through more than others. If people think they had a bad day, if I think I've had a bad day, Paul could top it. He talks about the lashings, the whippings he got, not whoopings, but whippings he got. And he says he received from the Jews 5 times the 40 less one. So they could whip you 40 times, but they don't want to go over and hit 41, so they'd stop at 39. If you times that by 5, you get 195 lashes Paul has received in his lifetime. I don't know if you ever thought about how Paul looked, but Paul, at the end of his life, was not an attractive man. Paul's back, if you saw it, you probably wouldn't know it was a back. Paul bears the marks of the gospel. He then tells he's been beaten 3 times with rods by his own people, perhaps, and more likely. He was stoned once, thought he was dead. He was shipwrecked, spent a whole day in the sea. So many terrible things happened. All these accounts of being in fear of all these things could happen to him. And then on top of that, hunger, thirst, nakedness, coldness, weariness, worrying about the church. So Paul's went through all these things, and this is a great cause for complaining. If I was going to complain about something, every time I woke up, every time Paul woke up, I'm sure he felt this. He rolled out of bed or got up from the ground, wherever he slept at, and he felt the pain that went through his body because of all the stuff he went through. But it shocks me to see this that Paul says in Romans 8:18, okay? For I consider the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. This is probably my favorite verse Paul ever wrote. How is it he can say this? After all that he went through, after being beaten, having bones broken, being left for dead, how can he say, I consider these things are not even worthy to talk about? I won't even keep them in my mind. I push them far away. It's because of the joy he had, knowing what would be revealed in them soon, joy in faith and joy through faith. To think about the last scripture, the one that Mac read for us, here we kind of get all of it put together. He says, we are being hard-pressed. We're not crushed, though. We're being persecuted, not forsaken. All these terrible things are happening. Circumstances are terrible. But we remember that God is still with us. God is still for us. And in the end, we have that hope of being resurrected with Christ, knowing that that is where our joy comes from. It's not anything here we made ourselves. It is through our faith in God and His promises. Again, summarizing what he says in Philippians there, do not grumble, do not dispute, but be glad and rejoice with me. I want to end by giving a quote to you. It says, we are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think. When the mind is pure, joy follows like a shadow that never leaves. This is accredited to Buddha. We're not sure if he actually did say it or not, but it's accredited to him. Yeah, probably some other guy. We decide, though, how we'll live our lives based on our thoughts, based on what we put in our minds. And we can live in many different ways based on how we think. We can fill our heads with ourselves, with selfishness, and think that everything in our life is supposed to go great for us. Think that whenever we live, when we wake up in the morning, we should have a perfect day. But this will only lead to sorrow and complaining because it is impossible. We're going to go through life and things are going to go down and they are going to hurt us. On the other side, we can live our lives in our mindset knowing that we have faith that God is in control despite any circumstance we find ourselves in. If we find ourselves with a flat tire one day, we can have joy that God still loves us. God's still going to bring us home with Him to heaven one day. Despite the circumstances, God is still with us. And this leads to joy. Inexpressible joy, okay? Joy that cannot be taken away, joy that lasts forever, knowing that we will one day be with God in heaven, where these former things are past, crying, pain, people being mean to us, relationships being ended, family members dying. Those things will be gone one day, and that is what should drive us. So as we go through our lives, we go through this semester, this week, with our classwork, with whatever we do, let's make sure we're doing it joyfully, knowing that maybe things aren't great now, but things one day will be amazing, far beyond anything we can imagine. Thank you.